Well, welcome back, or welcome to the Rebel Tech Podcast, where myself and the Honorable Zach Whiting discuss the promises and perils of emerging technology and the social, political, and policy landscapes in Texas. I'm David Dunmoyer, your host today, and the campaign director at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. And we're currently in the middle of a series exploring the top tech legislative priorities for TPPF, our organization, in the 2025 legislative session. And today we're going to discuss the hot topic, and a topic that, Zach, you have been working on for years now, which is kids' online safety. And I know we took episode 0 to kind of explain your background as a former state senator. And I remember one of the first conversations we had where, do we call you the Honorable Zach, Senator Zach? And you said, just call me Zach. And you said that as a way of showing you've got a lot of hats that you wear in your current job as policy director at TPPF, but I know one that's most important to you is that of husband and father. And we're talking kid safety. And this is an issue that, as I mentioned, is near and dear to your heart. And I'd love just for your passion to shine through on this. Why is this an issue that you care so deeply about? And how did you first kind of enter this advocacy space on kid safety legislation?
Yeah. So when we were pregnant with our first child, we always said we're never going to be the parents that let the kid. We're not going to let the kid have a cell phone until they're 16. We're certainly not going to let the kid use an iPad or watch TV and all those kind of things. And then you get to about 7 months old, and the only way you can get through a diaper change is to hold Hakuna Matata on the iPad, which is literally what happened over their head to change their diapers. And you realize, okay, wow, this And so we have young children. They're in school. They have exposure to technology. They have devices at home, right? We put all kinds of stuff on there. We put filters. We put time limits. We say, you can use this app, but not that app, and this website, not that website. We have all this kind of stuff on there, and yet somehow things still get through, and there's exposure to that. And, we think back to my childhood, and let's just say every, generation, let's say since the beginning of man. And there's all kinds of stuff that people are exposed to, right? We live in a sinful, fallen world. But the ubiquity and reach of how this stuff, how it can reach children is just devastating. And so, I was a former lawmaker. It's a job that I had. It's before that, I was a congressional staffer. And as a matter of policy, those were two areas where I really was exposed to, okay, this stuff, this unease that I feel as a parent, and then as we get into the research that frankly everyone else is feeling and seeing as well, there's something to this. And it was really during that time when I was, worked on, some stuff on the House Judiciary Committee on, kid sexual abuse material, child pornography, trafficking, and all those kind of things that really opened my eye to the real nasty, horrible, rotten stuff out there. And so since that time, I've really, wanted to be a champion for kids' online safety, and frankly, online safety for everybody, in the public policy arena.
Yeah. Well, by way of background now, I guess we can jump into, you mentioned research, and that's something, when I talk to staff and I talk to members about the research that you did on kids' online safety, I'm not saying this as a biased colleague of yours. I'm saying this having read a lot of the research that went into informing your paper. It is the most comprehensive research paper in the country on kids' safety. And I'd love for you to kind of just jump in, and if there's any top lines you want to provide in how the foundation engaged this issue initially and what your research kind of unpacked on kids' safety broadly.
Yeah. So I got hired probably 2.5 years ago to start our technology policy initiative and kind of try to find that sort of North Star movement conservative approach to technology policy. And we look at the landscape and where you can get in and be most effective. And one of the areas where just everything lined up, all the stars aligned, was data privacy, which we'll talk about in another episode, but also kids' online safety. And so the initial policy prescription that we put out that led to the research paper was, let's ban kids from using social media. And thankfully, we have a really good comms team. Some of them are in the room here with us that say, well, let's massage the messaging on that, but the principle remains. So we go into that with the animating principle and policy idea, and then we do some extensive research. And there's a lot of literature review and case studies and the like. And the evidence, the research is sobering. And so you have research. So you have the creation of social media circa 2000 with things like MySpace, but it really reaches this sort of point of that it sort of enters the zeitgeist of American teenagers with Facebook, right? And that's in 2004. And so you see that spread. And I was in high school then, and then I was in early college, and we talk about it being a social networking connection device. So when I was in high school getting ready to go into college, it helped me meet some of my new classmates, helped me meet my roommates and people on my floor, some people I was going to, share the major with and that sort of thing. But then fast forward to about 2008, and I'm getting, dumped on for how much my, light switch is on and whether Danica Patrick is a good race car driver or not. And you see where we're headed. With the trajectory of social media. And this is where in 2008, researchers really start to recognize, whoa, the kids aren't all right. And why is it? So you go through the research and they say, well, was it the financial crisis? Was it, this, that, and the other? And what some very respective researchers and professors, among them Jonathan Haidt, Jean Twenge, who's a professor at the University of California, I think at San Diego, Jonathan Haidt is a sociologist at New York University, and then Professor Brad Wilcox at the University of Virginia, folks that have studied this over a long period of time and have found the research and demonstrated the links between screen time and then, as they refined that, social media and all these sorts of harms that kids are seeing. And it's it's bad stuff, right? It's not, yes, you can find Hakuna Matata and, those kind of fun things. It is harmful content, depression, suicide, anxiety, self-harm, eat your Tide Pod, do the blackout challenge. Here's how you steal a Kia with a USB, body dysmorphia. Here's how you can starve yourself. There's the girl that puts the rings, around her forearm, and it's devastating.
And why are kids doing that? I mean, the blackout challenge or any of the eating disorder, from your research and experience, why are there kids that are doing this? Is this the social media companies? Is this wanting to fit in and be cool? Just thoughts on that.
Well, it's all the above. I mean, it's you have this sort of network effect. Hey, everybody's using this or everybody's doing that. I need to fit in and be cool. We have this. Let's talk about the Kardashians, but you have the Kardashification, of the culture where it's like, what are you famous for? You're famous for being famous, and so we see a lot of that in people that want to be YouTubers or influencers. They have to push the envelope, and because it's the controversial that gets eyeballs and gets the conversation going. And so that's why you see the envelope pushing further and further. And then because of the ubiquity and how many people use social media, in the research paper, the number I think was 4.48 billion social media users worldwide. More than half the world uses social media. Thankfully, I'm not one of them. And boy, do I feel so much better for it. But that's how many people use it. And when you have that degree of ubiquity, and there's so many avenues for just bad people who really want to do bad stuff. And, or as the Joker said, or they said about the Joker, sometimes bad people just want to burn things down. They just want to watch it burn. And sadly, we have some of that online. So, so there's all that kind of stuff. There's the exposure to it. And then there's those effects, those causal effects. And I know everyone wants to be like linked, causation, correlation, all that stuff. Those causal links between the stuff people see on social media and those negative harms that people have. Then let's talk about the potato in the room. Yeah,
right. That's why do we have a potato here,
so
Zach?
Here's why
what
we
kind
have
of potato is
here's
that?
Why we have a potato. And my boss Derek once told me we don't do props. Well, Derek, we're doing props. But it
Isn't he
makes
deep fake anyway? Doesn't matter. He can't actually punish you.
I know. So we'll have the sweet tea ladies not plug that into as a generative AI avatar. But there's a serious point about potatoes, and that is you have all those great researchers, and it was particularly the work of Professor Twenge, and there were two professors. Professor Orban was the primary researcher on it, and this is the scientific method, right? Is you create a hypothesis, you test the hypothesis, and you find, is it valid or not? And so scientists test the validity of other people's hypotheses, and that is what Professor Orban did. And so Professor Orban's research essentially concludes this, is, you know what, in this space of kids' online safety, you can just cherry pick whatever data you want, and here's what you find. Social media using online stuff is no more harmful than a potato, okay? So I'll say this. One, that's just disgusting and offensive. But two, the interesting thing is that in a research paper whose premise is you can cherry pick data and reach whatever conclusion you want, guess what Professor Orban's research found? There is actually negative, harmful effects from using social media, but it's really, 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 really small. Sure. And so we have the chief academic opponent of kids' online safety measures ultimately concluding, while conceding that you can cherry pick data to do this, that it's harmful. So it's to your question. There's harmful content out there. It is linked to all of these harmful behaviors, and in a lot of places, particularly depressive spirals and stuff like that, things just spiral out of control. And then with how algorithmic curation works, is you go on there and you want to watch Hakuna Matata, and then you realize that, hey, that same movie may have had, Disney, you talk about these messages, these subliminal messages they put in. There's all kinds of stories about how Disney puts all this kind of weird stuff into movies, including The Lion King. And before you know it, you're trying to watch Hakuna Matata while changing your kid's diaper, and you go down the rabbit hole and you're learning about, how some, sex pervert can groom a child. That is what is on the internet.
Yeah.
And we can sit here and say, use personal responsibility, don't go on that kind of stuff. We have platforms that are hosting this disgusting content, and then guess what they're doing? They're hiding behind, hey, it's a free market if you don't want to use it, and they're hiding behind things like Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. And so that's a whole nother can of worms, and we can get into that. But the point is this. There are bad people on the internet. There are bad people everywhere that want to do bad things to people. And frankly, we have giant social media platforms that are serving it right up to kids, algorithmically curated to them based on things like, the data that they that they pull on them, which we talk about in a different episode.
And thank you for addressing the potato in the room. I know one of the things that we talked about was Frances Haugen, after the big Facebook Files event, and a lot of the information was being unveiled. The Wall Street Journal had a great series. Yes. They did 6 or 7 articles.
Yes.
And one of them was on how Facebook, when they were still Facebook and Instagram, they had an internal strategy for how to addict progressively younger cohorts of kids. And we're talking kids as young as, I think it was 4 to 5. Yeah. And it's the lifelong users. And I think for our audience, it's worth mentioning, you mentioned network effect. And the network effect, of course, the idea that not just when you're using the platform do you feel the anxiety, suicidality, depression, but because you said it was 4.5 billion users, and that word is very intentional. Yes. There's always discussion and discourse happening about what's happening online and not in real life. And so even if it's 9 hours a day on a screen, which is insane, the remaining hours of the network effect, it's still infiltrating your brain because you're thinking about when can I use next, and this person's using or talking about it. So that's I don't know. I remember when you were talking to me about the potato study, and like one of the questions I have too is, well, if you huck a potato at a kid's head, that hurts pretty bad. Like what is potato consumption? We never addressed that.
Consumption.
Yeah. Okay.
Consumption. So eating potatoes. And by the way, I'm going to go home and eat this potato in Professor Orban's honor tonight.
Good. Yeah.
But yeah, and just to just to hit on a few of those statistics. Well, a bigger picture. One of the things, and these were researchers, I believe, out of the Netherlands, and they put together a survey. Now, social media addiction is not a diagnosable condition using the DSM-5, the manual that doctors and psychologists and psychiatrists use to diagnose mental illness conditions. It's not. I believe they've explored internet addiction and the like, but what those researchers have found is that there is a biopsychosocial component to this that shares characteristics of substance abuse addiction. And so you have that cycle of addiction that goes there. And you see that where it's somewhere in I think it's 43% of teenagers say they are online almost constantly. That's a Pew poll, and we can link to it in the show notes. But that's in the research. Kids, to your point, using anywhere between 4 and 6, and teenagers 9 hours a day. Yeah. Anecdotal stuff about. I mean, look. How many of our thousands and thousands and soon to be millions and millions of listeners use their phone on the toilet? I mean, come on.
Sure.
There are people that they use it in the shower, and that's not like creepy. That's people reported that as part of the Wall Street Journal reporting.
I mean, it is kind of creepy though.
It is creepy. Yeah. It's creepy. Yeah. But that's the mindset. Is you have to addict people when they're trying to go to the bathroom and take a shower.
Yeah.
And then there's that piece that you mentioned. It's the younger and younger you addict people, you get them to be lifelong users. And so, and in this case, probably abusers and addicts. And one of the things that when we talked about earlier, the sort of initial messaging, but it has kind of caught on, is that social media is today's cigarette. And it's for all those reasons that we talked about. It's addictive, it's everywhere. And so the initial policy proposal that we put out was, let's put age limits. And we'll talk about policy and those kinds of things we did, but let's put age limits on that. And that's not some new or radical idea. People think it is. You want to take away the parents' ability to make these decisions for themselves? And the state already puts age limits on a lot of behaviors. We talk about this in the paper. It's well cited. It is things like smoking, drinking, driving a car, entering into an enforceable contract, joining the military, getting a tattoo, gambling on slot machines, all those kinds of things. There are age limitations on that. And, people talk about, is that the state being paternalistic or whatever? States are the laboratories of democracy, and they can make those judgments. And in this case, this is an area where I think people realize, hey, we need to go. And it's not, and again, we can talk about the paternalism of, government and stuff like that. Parents are asking for help.
Yes.
I'm asking for help. Parents are asking for help. We did some polling here, and the numbers were amazing. 71% of parents think it's harder to parent in the digital age. They think smartphones are more harm than good. Some 84% of parents think that it's too easy to find explicit material online. They're realizing that kids, the average age of exposure to pornography for kids is 12 years old, and they're not finding it underneath the neighbor's daddy's bed. They're finding it on their phones. Half of them are finding that accidentally and that kind of stuff. Like, look, these aren't things we're making up. These are the statistics. These are the reality, and parents and people are asking for help, and thankfully lawmakers.
So yeah, let's go to that.
Are stepping up.
Thank you for unpacking that, because I think it's one thing mentioning the statistics, the studies that have been done, but you spent a lot of time in the thick of the arena last session on a number of kids' online safety bills. And, I don't think we have time to go through each and every one. So Zach, give us a high level. Lawmakers stepped up.
Yeah.
Last session, there was a title shift that we saw happening just down the block here at the Capitol. What happened last session?
Well, and I'll say this: it happened within, I think, a number of months, and it's kind of those things where all the things lined up at the right time. Big picture, this is not like we say. This is a bipartisan issue. This is a nonpartisan issue, right? keeping kids safe, keeping people safe, vulnerable populations safe online, there's no partisanship to that. There are interested parties who don't want to see it. But the idea that we initially proposed that, social media age prohibition for minors, we were told by let's say high up members in the legislature and their staffs, there is a 0% chance that this bill will pass. They were right. Bill didn't get a hearing. Bill didn't pass. But among that were about 8 or 9 contingencies that we laid out for leadership. And among those priorities was a broad kids online safety bill, House Bill 18. And we had Representative Slauson who carried that in the House. And we had her in here for an interview on that. And she did a masterful job managing that bill through the process. Then we sent it over to the Senate, and Senator Hughes did a masterful job in handling that. And even though, as bills do, they change as you go from introduction to the process to ultimately what passed out of the Senate was signed into law. That is still a slam dunk. That is a landmark bill, and it is, I think, the most comprehensive kids online safety bill and parent empowerment bill. We in the data privacy space, we talk about giving users more rights and control over their data. This bill does the same thing. It gives parents more tools and control over the content, the data, and the exposure to a lot of this harmful content online. So that is a great bill. Then we look at a few other bills that we worked on. Was House Bill 1181, which was age verification for pornography. And that is exactly the same thing as House Bill 896 that Representative Patterson initially introduced. It is age verification for a sliver of the internet, for access to pornographic and obscene content. And so the model is there. Next session, let's just take another slice of the internet and let's look at age verification on social media. That bill originally, I think people give rightful credit to a lawmaker in Louisiana who championed that, but a lot of other states stepped up and did that, and Texas chief among them. And that is a sensible bill. It is, hey, if you want people to access your obscene content, which is fine. You want grown-ups, they can make those decisions, but not kids, because it's harmful, it's addictive. There's really bad stuff. There's pedophilia, there's child sexual abuse material, there's all kinds of stuff on there. If you want people to look at that, just verify their age. That's it. It's simple. It's not hard. There are mechanisms to do that. It's not violative of privacy. You're not given, verifying your age is not the thing you should be worried about as a matter of privacy. It's everything they collect on you after the fact, which again we talk about in another episode on data privacy. And instead of complying with the law, the big companies, they took their ball and they ran, and they do not allow access in the state of Texas to their websites.
So why did Pornhub leave the state of Texas, Zach?
Well, so because, and we've seen these messages and these threads online, is they're losing a valuable user base, and that's the children, right? It's 40-year-old men and whatever, they're addicted. They're hooked. But if you want to addict the next generation, you got to start young, right? Yeah. You got to start young, and they recognize that. And so if they can't let kids under 18, if they can't let the average age 12-year-old, and let's not remember, that's the average, right? So there's kids younger than that are seeing this kind of stuff. And so rather than comply with a not only a reasonable law, a law for which the government has a compelling interest and it's narrowly tailored. So take that strict scrutiny argument to the courts.
So are you telling me, Zach, that the business model of large porn companies is to rob the innocence of a child as soon as humanly possible so they can be suckling on the immorality teat of these companies for their entire life? Just to make sure I understand, that is the goal of big porn. Okay.
Yes.
So, of course, I asked this rhetorically because that was a huge win. And Supreme Court of the United States, where we're filming this at the beginning of May, just recently said they are not going to hear the arguments of big tech and of the porn industry because it is, in fact, constitutional to do exactly what you just said.
The Fifth Circuit upheld it.
Fifth Circuit upheld it. Supreme Court said we're not going to hear the arguments.
Yes.
So we're we had a tremendous session last
Yep.
session on kid safety. There's still bits and pieces of House Bill 18, as you laid out, that's being operationalized.
Yep.
And there's a joint select committee in the House and in the Senate that's
Yes.
going to look at and study kid safety.
Yes.
And I know Representative Jared Patterson was appointed
Yes.
to chair that joint committee.
Yes.
So there's still, in fact, there's more momentum heading into next session. How are we going to capitalize on that with our Liberty Action agenda for the tech campaign?
Yeah, so one is a bill that didn't get through, and that was Senate Bill 417. That's also like there's very sensible bills here, right? And what that bill is it says that the device filtering software that is already on the phones, just turn that light switch on by default. When that phone gets activated, flip the switch on instead of leaving it off. And instead of making people go through a very complicated, 10, 15, 20 step process to turn that on, just have it on. And if people want to turn it off, let them turn it off. That bill didn't make it through, and I think it was as much of a procedural thing as it was substantive. And I would just say this. I would encourage our viewers to go and watch that portion of the committee hearing. We may or may not have some of it clipped on our YouTube page, and lawmakers had some pretty strong thoughts about, let's just say, industry that showed up opposed to those kinds of legislation, to default device filtering and kids' online safety, and keeping kids off of pornography. And that goes to that bigger picture of where we're at. The political momentum is there. And this is where I think the political momentum is, and this is where Texas needs to capitalize. Everything lawmakers did last year is wonderful. It's outstanding, and we can't stop.
Yeah.
And so the big moonshot that we started with back in October 2022 is putting age verification on social media. And HB 18 did some good things in that direction. What was House Bill 896, and we've got some ideas of how we can improve that language. That should be the lone star, the North Star that we look at. And again, this isn't some crazy or radical idea, because everybody in Texas likes to, Governor Abbott this and Governor DeSantis this. Florida passed such a bill and signed such a bill into law. For under 15 and 13 and 14 and all these kind of things, let's go big. Let's go big or go home. 18 and under.
Yeah.
If you want to use social media, be 18 years old. And if you're under, don't use it. Because again, the same model the porn industry uses, what social media companies do. You got to get your users hooked younger and younger. Even though federal law says, you can't limit, you can't collect, certain data on kids under 13, they do. Yeah. Kids under 13 use these products. They shouldn't. They don't need to. And frankly, these products haven't been around, that long. I mean, we talked about earlier the creation of things like MySpace and the early 2000s and Facebook in 2004. These products have been around for like less than 25 years. And depending on your view of how long humanity has been around, a couple thousand years or a couple 100 billion years, whatever it is, for that long in human history, we did not have these type of products. And I think that goes into a broader conversation, in which I think we should talk about in another episode. But I'll just say this notion that because technology is here, we just roll over and be like, it's here, let's not worry about it. Don't be a Luddite. That's ridiculous. One of the great thinkers in the sort of techno criticism space, Neil Postman, talks about how technology is not additive. It's ecological. It changes the very ecosystem. And you go back and look, the sort of one of the first examples he uses is we're going way back here. We're gonna wax historical and theoretical here for just a moment. But you go back and you say, well, it wasn't just Europe plus the printing press. It fundamentally changed Europe. And for the better, right? Literacy is super good. It furthers, modern education. It allowed sort of Enlightenment philosophy. It allowed ideas to go from you're in a room and you can tell 10 people to millions of people. Those are good things, right? social media is not good, right? It's not. And parents realize that it does more harm than good. And so we really are at this really interesting point. And this is why it goes back to one of those opening points. This is nonpartisan, and we have reached this moment where the culture is stepping back and saying, are these things, are they really good for us? And I think that's an important question for people to ask. And then you step back and ask yourself those questions, maybe you decide that they are. But the fact that we're having a conscious and important cultural conversation, and not just in the culture, but in the policymaking space, is very encouraging. And I am confident that lawmakers will continue that momentum and continue to enact strong kids online safety bills next session.
Yeah, amen. Well, I can't say it any better than you, but what I'll just add, one of the things, we're in the interim right now. We're going to have some select hearings on this. The Senate and State Affairs, they're going to be looking at kid safety. So all the more reason to continue the momentum. And for folks, of course, listening too, this is something that will follow very closely heading into next session. And Zach, as the really tip of the spear at the foundation and in many respects in the movement for pushing the envelope on kid safety legislation. So with that, thank you, Zach, for your passion, your leadership, and commitment to fighting not just for your kids, but for the some 11 million kids in Texas and beyond, because what starts here will ultimately change the country. No matter what DeSantis and the Florida legislature has to say about it, I know we've got some great ideas planned for next session to go even further.
Yes.
So in future episodes, we'll continue to dive into more of the policy, and I know we have a couple more of our LAA top priorities that we'll unpack in our next couple of episodes. But as episode 2, we now have 2 of our kind of, I shouldn't say top because AI is our top, but the ones that we really built our reputation and brand on for last session. And so to our listeners, that's all we have for this episode. And thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited for subsequent episodes, so hope you'll join us. And make sure, if you're not following our work on texaspolicy.com, continue to go there. We have great tech policy research, op-eds, videos, and more good content that's just waiting to be published.